Good morning, namaste, and welcome to this another edition in the program Addiction and Recovery. This is a program that has been mounted on Thursdays at 9 to 10 a.m. and it will be repeated again on radio and TV Jagriti at 10 p.m. tonight. For those of you who are unable to stay on with us for the remaining the entire length of the program, you can join us again. And the program is also being recorded and will be posted on Facebook as soon as and YouTube as soon as it's finished in about 10 minutes. So those of you who would like to go back and look at anything that was said in the program, or you want to refer it or send a link to someone who you believe might benefit from the conversations we are having here. I also want to remind all our listeners that this is a call-in program. It's interactive. I have sent the information out to a lot of people who are in recovery, and they are also encouraged to call. And in their instance, if you have been in recovery, you might be able to even give some comments, share briefly some of your own experiences in recovery. And of course, you can also call me in the interim between programs. And if you have questions that you'd like me to treat with live on the program, you can do so. And I would be willing. You can also WhatsApp the questions to my personal account, those of you who have it, and I will respond to them on the program. Now, just a little history of this. I started doing these programs on radio at first in April of 1983. I remember it was Alcohol Awareness Week. I was working at Cora Hospital as a psychiatric social worker, and I was asked by a good friend and who was a announcer at another radio station at the time, Indian formatted station, if I would come on and do a program on the effects of alcoholism and so on. It was an interactive program, and it was only supposed to be for that week because it was Alcohol Awareness Week. But the subject matter was so interesting. There were so many people calling in, so that the host at the time asked me if I'll come back the next week. And I said, sure, because in those days, I had to go to St. Anne's Hospital every Friday to see patients in preparation to have them transferred to the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Center. So the radio station was on the way, and I just drop in and do the program. And that program ran for a very long time. And I know people who today are in recovery, and they do say that, it is out of listening to that program, they were motivated to do something about their drinking and drug use. And why I'm saying this is that, in spite of this program running for over 30 years now, one might quickly say, well, boy, it seems like it's not making much of a difference. But it is difficult to measure that because, and I'm saying this deliberately because I know there are a lot of family members, there are people who are in the helping professions who feel very discouraged that they have been trying with some people for years, they've been trying with some patients, they've been trying with some relatives, friends, colleagues, and they seem to be getting nowhere. And that could lead to a certain amount of frustration and discouragement. And so I'm speaking to those people because I know I've been there, done that. I've been working in this field for over 40 years now. So I have a fairly good experience when it comes to that. And I also know what works. I have a good idea of what don't work. And a lot of times we are employing strategies to help our loved ones, our acquaintances, and with all good intention, we are really not being effective because we are not employing the right methods. So that I know there's a lot of people have sent in questions You know, the main question is how to get this person who is drinking or using drugs to accept they have a problem and to become willing to do something about it. You know, that has been one of the major issues, and it still continues to be one of the major issues when it comes to the whole question of addiction and recovery and so on. So I want to deal with that this morning. And of course, I want to remind our listeners, this is an interactive program. You can call at any time. The numbers are 663-2335 or 663-1027. You can call and the operators will notify me that we have a caller and we'll take the question right away. As I say that, I want to thank Francis and all those people in the studio who source all of these videos every week to educate our brothers and sisters out there. You know, it is really a very good start to the program because this morning the topic was on the use of exercise in the treatment of drug addiction. And I'll probably comment on that in a little while as well. But coming back to that frustration that most people experience of getting someone or you yourself realizing, you're starting to realize that, hey, people keep complaining about my drinking. At first, it is very annoying, when people speak to you about your drinking, because I speak from the perspective of a person who have been there and done that. I am also a person in recovery. I drank for about 23 years, and I've mentioned that a few times on this program. And yes, I am an alcoholic in recovery as well, you know, and so I could identify with a lot of the difficulties from both sides of the fence because for years I knew I had a problem with alcohol. You know, I'm not foolish. I was a pretty bright kid in school, came from a very respectable family, have, always prized the whole fact of being honest. And that's one of the first steps to doing anything about any problem, whether it be alcoholism, drug addiction, whether it be financial, whether it be marital, whether it be uh, interrelated with colleagues, siblings, neighbors, whatever. A problem is only a problem when the person recognizes who has the problem or who has to deal with it, recognizes there's a problem. It's one of definition, as it is said. So if a person do not define something as a problem, it's not a problem. In some societies, even homosexuality is not a problem. In some societies, polygamy is not a problem. It is only when the society or the individual defines the situation as problematic, then it becomes a problem. And in Trinidad and Tobago, a lot of people don't see drinking. They see drinking and drug use as a problem, but not for them. They all believe, well, look, I could handle my stories. And I thought so for years. You know, although I knew I was spending money I should not, I was getting into conflict with my relatives. And I was, getting sick and not being able to go to work sometimes. It was affecting almost every area of my life. Yet, I still persisted. And I have often wondered why. And I'm going to share those thoughts because the answer that I have come up with is the fact is we are socialized. Remember, as children, at first our parents would do everything for us. They would bathe us, feed us, change us, and everything. But gradually, with time, there's a sort of competition to have us grow up very quickly. In fact, our mothers and parents and some will brag, look, he got his first teeth and now he's starting to creep and now he's standing up, and they compare with other people. So the comparison starts even from there. And eventually we become aware of that competitive nature that exists in society because we want to be able to run faster than everyone else, climb higher than them, come out higher than them in class, there is that, and nothing is wrong with having that competitive spirit. But I'm saying that to say it is that movement to being, to excel and to be self-sufficient is always at the root of most of our choices and motivations. So that it is every young man and young woman's ambition to prove to their parents, especially, and to their siblings that, look, I can handle my stories. I am self-sufficient. So our mothers and parents would tell us, look, you're old enough to bathe yourself now. You're old enough to comb your hair. You're old enough to get dressed. And so they will continue to support us, and maybe in the early stages before teenage and all of that, they will be deciding most of the things for us. But from teenage, one of the developmental tasks of all human beings is to become independent, is to develop a personality of our own. And that is the time we start cutting the navel string, as we say, from our parents. In fact, some of us become so resentful of authority, or parents and teachers and all of that. There's a tendency to become rebellious because it impinges upon our individuality, our ability to make decisions. And sometimes we insist on it, and I'm telling everyone listening out there today, all our brothers and sisters, to those of you who have gone through that stage, to go back in your mind's eye and remember those days, the early teens, 14, 15, 16, and so on. The psychologists, the developmental psychologists have all written a lot of literature on this subject, where there's a tendency for young people to become rebellious. So if my father was wearing fat pants, I don't want that. I want gun mouth pants. If he's cutting his hair short, I go into grow mine long. It is wanting that push to become an individual in our own right. And some of us struggle with that, between our parents trying to do what they think is good for us, and we proving to them that, look, we don't need their help. And sometimes we go down the wrong path as a result. Just out of rebellion, we do things just to prove that, look, we have arrived, we are now adults, and we should be allowed. And so, even though they said, boy, you should not smoke cigarettes, I was going to smoke cigarette, because my friends were doing it. And there again, there's a peer pressure. And I'll speak to that in a minute, you know, and you shouldn't drink, because I remember in my case, I wanted to join a little orchestra band. And my father said, what are you going to do that for? All you do is learn to drink rum. And just aside from the topic, this weekend we had a group from Suriname and Guyana who were doing classical singing. And one of the presenters did in fact relate to what we are saying, because in those days, our own classical singers, if you go back into our experience, those of us who are old as me, you'd remember every cooking night, they'll have two or three classical singers there. And most of these were very talented people, but you couldn't help noticing that the alcohol was in the mix. In fact, a lot of singers will tell you they can't perform as well, as good, unless they had a few drinks. You understand? And it leads me to my own experience. Yes, I did join that little group. It was called Shankar Maya Orchestra. And we got a job to perform at a farewell night in La Romaine, Pond Street. And it was my first time I am going to be singing in public. And when it was coming to my turn to sing, I was literally trembling inside. I was scared because there's always that fear that we will make a fool of ourselves. And one of the older members of the group took me to the back and he gave me a strong shot of strong rum, they call it in those days. And in a little few minutes, I felt so brave. I was only supposed to sing one song. I sang two and was getting ready to sing three. The MC had to take the mic from me. And I never forgot that experience. I always remembered that, alcohol caused me to lose that feeling of shyness, you know, of self-restraint and fear and all of that. And that would have become one of the basic underpinnings later on, or in every situation where I felt self-conscious. I knew alcohol will help me, So if I went to a fete and I wanted to ask somebody to, or I wanted to dance just so by myself, I wouldn't be able to do it unless I had a few drinks. And I'm just using that to illustrate what happens with a lot of people who start drinking out of curiosity. Yes, when I had my first, even before that, my first cigarette or drink was because I was in a group of friends. We belonged to a gym. We were going on a trip, walking from Gandhi village to what is known as the creek at Mosquito Creek to go bathe. And one of the guys had a brown paper bag with alcohol in it. And he passed it around. Everybody, three or four of my friends had a drink and then it passed it to me. And I couldn't say no, even though I knew I shouldn't be drinking alcohol. But I wanted to be part of the group. So I drank it and it blistered my throat. But I smiled because I didn't want to appear to be less than the other people. So I'm sharing this to let parents, siblings, people who have not had the experience understand how these are some of the antecedents. These are some of the little incidents that form the impression that starts that tendency to start becoming. I started to become dependent on alcohol now to become to keep my membership in the group and also to feel brave. And then I found other uses, I'm normally a very quiet person, introverted, but when I take my few drink, I could talk to people, I could make jokes, I could sing. And so I found more and more utilitarian purposes for alcohol. And I'm saying all of this to say that when you think about telling a person to stop, or suggesting that they should give up the drugs, it is important that you understand all of these other things that they have been using it out of curiosity at first, recreationally, but over time they have become dependent on it to feel good about themselves, to deal with low self-esteem, to help them to cope with disappointment, with frustrations, with failure, with rejection, with all of those things. They have started using the alcohol and the drugs to help them. Even with the whole question of boredom. After a while, some people can't deal with being alone or boredom, so they have to drink or smoke to deal with it. And so once a person has found utilitarian purposes, uses for drugs and alcohol, then it becomes much more difficult for them because even if you take alcohol out of the equation, they still will have to deal with frustration and disappointment and depression and all of those things that normal people have to deal with. But what has happened here is in the teenage years when they should be learning proper coping skills, when they should be developing adequate self-esteem, they were escaping dealing and learning about those things by taking a drink or taking a smoke and using drugs and alcohol. So now, after all these years, they're probably 25, 30, 35 now, they're fully grown adults, but they never learned how to cope with these emotions, which are natural, necessary. Feelings of frustration and stress and boredom and all of that. They have been depending on drink and drug to help them to deal with it before the fact and sometime after the fact, or during the situation. Like I remember, you know, being asked to make a speech at my cousin's wedding. And it was a large wedding, and I did not feel um, adequate to do that. I was mortally afraid that I'd make a fool of myself. So I had to take a few drinks to build up the courage. And actually, when I made the speech, I almost insisted on making a fool of myself because I said a whole lot of things about my cousin that I shouldn't have said. You know, how we used to go and steal mangoes and things together. That was irrelevant at his wedding. But that is what happens, you take the drink and then the drink takes you, and then you can't really act in a responsible fashion. So I'm saying all of this to say for all our listeners, brothers and sisters out there who are listening and who are viewing this program today, if you have an alcoholic or a drug addict, a sibling, a spouse, a relative who has been using alcohol and drugs for a pretty long time, they have become psychologically dependent on the drug. But so that to deal with all the emotions, if the rain fall, they have to take a drink. If the sun hot, they take in a drink. If somebody getting married, they have to take a drink to celebrate. If somebody died, they have to take a drink to mourn. And this might appear to be funny, but this is real when it comes to the alcoholic and the drug addict. Now, in addition to that, over time, what happens is the body starts becoming physically dependent on the drug. That is, and you would probably, if you have a relative who has been on drugs for a long time, you'll notice when they drink, they can't remember what happened the night before. They'll come and accuse you of not giving them any food, or they'll look, this all the furniture is broken up and so on, and they can't understand who did it. They can't remember how they got home. Those are called blackouts. Those are pretty sure sign of alcoholism that is reaching the advanced stage. There are different stages in alcoholism. There is the beginning stage, there's the middle stage, and the chronic stage. A lot of people in the chronic stage now suffer with what is called blackouts. That is, they can't remember. After they start drinking, they can't remember things that happen after that. And that can be serious. That can be dangerous as well. And then you have those people who start hallucinating. And I know some family would think, well, maybe the neighbor has done us some obia or something, or they put something by the entrance there. Because I have heard a lot of people in recovery say, he was so good in the shop. I was so good making fun and everything. But as soon as I reach home, I don't know. It's like something, some zombie or something there. So, fact of the matter is, it is what is described in the medical fraternity as delirium tremens, where the person start hallucinating now and seeing things and hearing things that are not there. And the relatives who are unaware of this, they would probably make trips to several Obia men and Pandit and all of that, trying to get the zombie out of him. And a lot of them gets taken for a lot of money and all of that from unsuspecting, unscrupulous people, Obia men and so on. I see we have a question that was text to me. Are there effective treatments for drug addiction? Well, let me say out at the outset, there isn't a cure for drug addiction, but yes, there are effective treatments for drug addiction. And we are very fortunate in Trinidad and Tobago that we have several treatment facilities available to us. There is the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Center that is located at Cora Hospital. And their clinic is on a Thursday. And that is one of the reasons I couldn't get someone to come with me on the program, because they are in the middle of their clinic right now as we speak, the doctors and social workers and all of that. So some other arrangement may have to be made in the future to have one of their staff maybe come on the program, or something like that, or send questions. And then there's the New Life Ministries, who were supposed to be on the program with me today, but they too are swamped with a lot of work and they're short-staffed. So hopefully in sometime in the future, we'll have one of them. So there are effective treatments, but effective treatment must not be interpreted to mean that there's a cure. Because once you're an alcoholic or drug addict that has crossed that imaginary borderline from recreational or social drinking or drug use to compulsive drug use, then there's no going back. You can't cross it back. The treatment is that you have to find a way to stop, and you have to find a way to remain stopped and be comfortably so. And so there's what is called you can have a daily reprieve from drug addiction. But a person who has become addicted to alcohol and drugs cannot go back to social use, because what makes the difference, and let me just say this because a lot of people listening out there, and I've said this several times on the program, over the 31 years that I've been doing these programs, you'd be sure that whatever I'm saying today would have been said at some point in the past. But I suppose some people say repetition is one of the ways to reinforce what you're saying. So that the fact of the matter is that not everybody who drink or use drugs are alcoholic or drug addicts. But everybody who became alcoholics and addicted to drugs started with that first drink. Yes. So once you're drinking or using drugs, then you are putting yourself at risk. Now, for those of you who drinking, taking a drink or taking a smoke, if you have relatives who have been alcoholics, father, grandfather, great grandfather, then you know you might have inherited that genetic predisposition to drink or use drugs. So you need to be especially careful because you are more likely to become alcoholic than the average person. So that we are fortunate that we have one of the highest concentration of AA groups per capita than any other country in the world. And now last week I spoke about Narcotics Anonymous. I have a list of the various meeting places. We do have at least about 12, I think, meeting places where you can get help if you have an addiction to drug problem, cocaine, marijuana, cigarettes, and those things. So yes, although there's not a cure, but there is a lot of treatment, interventional methods available. There is the government, the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Center at Cora Hospital. You just go there on a Thursday and you will be assessed, and they will make a determination as to whether you need to be admitted into the inpatient program or you can be treated in the outpatient program. There's the New Life Ministries at Mount St. Benedict. They have a 3 months program there, and you can get in touch with them. If you need the contact, you can call me after the program. There's Rebirth House at Prisal that is doing a great job in terms of helping people there. And so yes, so that, and there's a Serenity Place in Point Fortin, Cochrane Village, that is for women in particular. It's predominantly women. And the New Life Ministry also has a treatment facility for women in Santa Flora. So these are places that can help a person. There's also the government hospitals, the psychiatric units that generally help with the detoxing of these people initially, because a lot of people who were using drugs up to that point in time, who especially having experienced withdrawal symptoms like blackouts and delirium tremens and the shakes and all of that, they need to be detoxed under supervision, and then they go through a treatment program. When they are discharged, if they link up with Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, they do very well. And we have hundreds and hundreds of people who have been able to do that in Trinidad and Tobago, maybe going into the thousands. Now, I know that a lot of people we have another question. that about withdrawals, how long does withdrawal last? Well, withdrawal can vary from person to person. The withdrawal for alcohol generally takes between 4 to 5 days when the shakes will stop and all of that. For some people, though, if they have experienced what they call delirium tremens, if they're hallucinating and so on, uh, then they need to be detoxed under supervision. As I mentioned, they need to be taken to a hospital because in that state, they 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 are seeing and hearing things, they see like people coming to kill them, animals coming to tear them up, and if and they I have seen it actually several times where people get up and jump through windows and run and could have killed themselves. They have had instances where people suffer heart attacks because of the fear that they experience when they're in that state of withdrawal. So that, especially for person, if you have someone out there who is starting to tell you, well, again, look, those fellas talking about me outside there, and there's nobody else there, or they're seeing things coming to harm them, you know, it is, especially if they drank the day before, it is not because of any zombie or spirit or anybody did any witchcraft on them. It is because they're in withdrawal. That's one of the classic withdrawal symptoms when you reach the chronic stage of seeing and hearing things that are not there. You understand? So those people need to be restrained somehow and taken immediately to a psychiatric unit, either Ward 1 in San Fernando, Ward 8 in Port of Spain, or St. Anne's Hospital, because they will need to be sedated and supervised until they go through the withdrawal symptoms. So that withdrawal for alcohol, as I said, if you're not hallucinating and having the shakes and all that, generally can take about 4 days. The physical withdrawals, that is. For marijuana is not, the withdrawal symptoms are not as severe. Neither it is for cocaine. But the physical withdrawals are yes, very dramatic. However, the psychological withdrawals can last a lifetime. Because remember, I was saying earlier on, a lot of people, when they get introduced to drugs, start using drugs. They're finding utilitarian value for it, using it some use it as a medication in order to be able to sleep, in order to be able to deal with anxiety. Some use it to deal with depression. And as I say that, some use it in conjunction with prescription pills. I have been seeing a lot of people who at first might have had some an occasion of being depressed because of some relationship issue, being jilted, or not doing so well in school, or losing a loved one, becoming depressed, or becoming anxious because of schoolwork or a relationship, and goes to the psychiatrist and they're prescribed, you know, tranquilizers and anti-anxiolytics, and after a while, you take these drugs and your body starts developing tolerance. And some people realize, well, the 5 milligram or the 10 milligram is now working, are still having trouble to sleep. So they start to supplement it with alcohol, which is also a sleeping, a sedative, or using marijuana along with the drug. And that is a prescription for danger, because the people who made the sleeping pills did not do the research on people who were using alcohol together with it. And the sleeping pill might put you to sleep. But when you take alcohol with it, it might not only put your brain to sleep, it may put your heart to sleep as well. And if your heart drop asleep, you know what happens? You don't wake up. So that is dangerous. And I'm seeing quite a number of people, doing that and making that fatal error to the point where now they can't come off. They come to AA, they come to treatment, and they're trying to stop using the alcohol, but they're still using the sleeping pills. And it's like you're not using the liquid form of it, you're using the solid form of it. you're still using it, both doing the same thing. So you'll never really be sober. You know, if one did that, then you'll have to start taking more and more pills, and you'll reach to a point somewhere in the imaginable future where no amount of the pill will be able to put you to sleep. But if you take 2 milligrams above that, you may very well overdose and kill yourself. So that, yes, withdrawals, to that last question, can last, psychological withdrawal can last a lifetime. Physical withdrawal is a short period, which can be done under supervision, but psychological, and this is why people who stop using drugs, they need to join a support group. They need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, for instance, where you are introduced to a program of recovery that helps to teach you new coping skills. It helps you to develop your self-esteem, because that is what that the 12-step program is all about. Because you look at yourself, you look at those areas where you are strong, but you also look at the areas in which you were weak in the past. You know, those attitudes and emotions and habits that were a liability, like your anger and your indiscretion and your selfishness and self-centeredness, all of those that landed you into trouble. Your inability to resolve conflict. So it helps you to recognize your weaknesses and your strengths, but it comes later on and tells you how to repair your relationships and to keep them in a good state of repair in step 10 and 9 and 10, where you make amends and you tell the people you're sorry, and you be mindful not to continue to be offensive, you know, and you become more aware and to respond rather than react to every situation. So that I want to thank the person who have been sending these questions. You know, this morning we dealt with effective treatments for drug addiction. Of course, this was just a short discussion. This is something that could be dealt with in much more greater length. And how long does withdrawal, as I mentioned, the physical withdrawal symptoms can last a short while, maybe a week, 2 weeks in some cases, depending on how long, how chronic the person was. Because some people, their body takes a longer time to readjust. But the psychological withdrawal takes a long time, because now you have to learn new ways of coping with old problems. You can't be doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result. You know, because there are basic underpinnings that cause a person to continue to use drugs, to perpetuate the drug use. And some of those are the selfishness and the self-centeredness, always wanting to be right. You're having an inflated ego. And as the programs go on, we will be talking about some of these things, but I want to say that I'm very grateful for all of you who sent in your questions. And I want to encourage our listeners, you know, you can send your questions. Those of you who have my WhatsApp number, you can send questions during the week. And yes, I see another question coming in. What can I do to strengthen my recovery? Well, I want to thank Francis and the people there who sourced that video. One of the powerful motivators for people in recovery, and I say so from personal experience, is keeping oneself healthy. Exercise is a very, very, very effective way of strengthening one's recovery. Secondly, is joining a support group like Alcoholics Anonymous, because here now you start meeting people who of similar mind, who are working on the same issues like you, who had a problem and who are trying to stay sober, and some of them who would have been there before you, so they can point out the potholes in the road of recovery to tell you why you should avoid this, avoid that. And remember, when we were drinking, we had a lot of friends who were alcoholics. And if we are going to stay sober, we have to stay away from those fellas, you know. And if we have to stay away from all our friends, we become lonely. And this is why it is important to make new friends now. By going to NA and going to AA, you build a new support system. You build a relationship with people who are in sobriety. And if you're having an urge to use a drug or you're having a problem that you feel is going to push you, it's challenging your coping skills, you can always call one of these people and they will be able to share with you maybe how they, and this, when you go to a meeting, this is what happens. People talk about the problems they had in recovery and how they were able to use the program to help them to deal with those things, and so that you also find camaraderie, you get involved in activities that you begin to realize, look, you could enjoy yourself. Like, for instance, this Monday, I was in a maxi with a set of singers and musicians from Guyana, and boy, these fellas were having a rollicking time going down in the vehicle singing. I was singing with them too and coming back, and it occurred to me, and I reminded one of the other people in the vehicle that, look, it is not true that you have to be drunk to enjoy yourself. So I know when we're having a good conversation, we always, time seems to fly. But I want to let our listeners know that this program is going to be recorded. It is being recorded. It is also going to be posted on YouTube and Facebook under the heading Addiction and Recovery so that you can access it. You can go back and listen to any parts of it. Or most important, you can send it as a link to other people who, alcoholics and drug addicts are proud people. You tell them, look, let's go to a meeting or sit down and listen to this man, hear what he's saying. I say, no, 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 he had a problem. I don't have a problem. They will give you talks like that. But secretly, nobody's a fool. Alcoholic and drug addicts are not fools. They will know secretly in their mind that they have a problem, but they don't want other people to know that they have a problem. So if you send them the link, when they by themselves, they'll sit down and they'll listen to it. And you will have planted a seed. They may not respond to it right away, but someday when they wake up in the morning after a hangover, they'll remember there was a fellow named Mr. Dwarika who was saying that there's a place you could go, or there are things that you can do if you want to stop drinking. And when that day come, of course, hopefully you will be there and I'll still be here to reach out and help that brother or sister. So I want to thank all of you who are listening. I want to thank those people who sent the question. And I want to remind you that every Thursday we have this program from 9 to 10, and you're quite welcome to join. If you have a question in the interim, you could send it to 671-3040. You can call me at that number, and I would make a note of it so I could deal with it on the program. You see, when you send a question, you're just not helping yourself. A lot of people are listening to this program, and I know a lot of people, they feel intimidated. They don't want to call the program because they don't want the neighbors to recognize their voice and so on. And so, because a lot of people call me after the program, and I suggested, why you don't call the program? Or in this case, you could send me a text on my WhatsApp, when I just like someone is doing here, and I could respond to the questions on the program. So I want to thank all of you for listening. I want to thank Francis and the crew at Radio and TV Jagriti. And to remind you all, this program will be aired again tonight at 10 p.m. on Radio and TV Jagriti. Until next week, Sitaram and goodbye.